So think of like the greatest heist movies you've ever seen. Usually the setup involves this highly sophisticated thief slipping past a grid of infrared lasers to, I don't know, steal millions in unmarked bills.
Right, or prying a priceless Renaissance painting out of its frame in the dead of night.
Exactly. We understand that kind of theft because, well, the object goes missing, the vault is empty. But what happens when the thing being stolen is data?
Oh, that changes everything.
Right, because the physical object never leaves the room. The victim doesn't even know it's been compromised until that stolen information has fundamentally altered the course of human history.
It completely redefines the concept of intellectual property theft. I mean, the victim is left holding their original notes, entirely unaware that the revelation those notes contain has just been, well, smuggled out of the building in someone else's mind.
And if you know your history of science, you know we are talking about Rosalind Franklin, the legendary Photo 51, and the discovery of the structure of DNA. So welcome to this deep dive.
We've got a really fascinating stack of sources to unpack today.
We absolutely do. We were looking at Brenda Maddox's definitive biography of Franklin, James Watson's, his highly controversial 1968 memoir, The Double-Helix, and Franklin's original, incredibly meticulous 1953 paper in the journal Nature.
And our mission here isn't just to recount, the most famous scientific injustice of the 20th century.
No, not at all. We want to understand the actual mechanics of her genius. So for you listening, if you've ever felt pressured to cut corners in your own work or watch someone else take credit for your rigorous preparation, Franklin's mindset offers this masterclass in what true technical mastery and unshakable integrity look like in practice.
Yeah, to really appreciate the scale of what she accomplished, we have to strip away the myth and look at the sheer agonizing difficulties of her daily reality.
So setting the scene.
Exactly. We need to go back to May 1952 into this damp, dreary basement laboratory at King's College, London. To capture the definitive image of DNA, Franklin wasn't just peering through a standard microscope.
Far from it.
Right. She was operating at the absolute bleeding edge of physics and chemistry.
And, her background completely primed her for that basement. Born in London in 1920 into a prominent Anglo-Jewish family, she was obviously gifted in math and science from the start, but it wasn't a smooth runway at all.
No, her father actually actively resisted funding her university education.
Which is wild to think about now.
It is. But in the cultural context of that era, he genuinely believed higher education for women was an unnecessary distraction. It actually took her aunt intervening just to get her through the door at Cambridge.
Which she capitalized on brilliantly, I might add.
Oh, absolutely. She earned her PhD studying the microstructure of coal. And during World War II, understanding the physical properties of coal wasn't just an academic exercise.
Right. It had massive, crucial industrial applications for the war effort.
Exactly. She learned how to find structure in this notoriously messy, porous, unpredictable substance. And from there, she spent 4 formative years in Paris, perfecting the art of X-ray crystallography.
The sources say those were really happy years for her, right?
Very much so. In France, she was treated as a peer. She thrived in an environment of intellectual equality.
But then 1951 rolls around and she returns to London to join the Medical Research Council unit at King's College. And the culture shock must have been immense.
Oh, jarring.
The sources describe it as a highly toxic environment, heavily driven by this massive miscommunication on literally day one.
Yeah, Maurice Wilkins, a senior researcher there, was somehow led to believe that Franklin is being brought in to be his assistant.
Wait, his assistant? She was an independent researcher?
Exactly. Brought in specifically because she possessed a skill set Wilkins lacked. But that initial friction, it calcified into a permanent hostility. Wilkins treated her with this condescension that Franklin, having just come from an egalitarian lab in Paris, simply refused to tolerate. They clashed instantly.
So she is isolated in this tense, unfriendly basement, tackling the most complex molecule in biology using X-ray crystallography. The sources explain this process and, well, the level of difficulty is almost comical by today's standards.
It really is.
It sounds like trying to deduce the exact three-dimensional shape of a complex crystal chandelier by turning off all the lights, shining a narrow flashlight at it, and then doing massive mathematical equations based solely on the scattered shadows the chandelier casts against the far wall.
That analogy captures the conceptual hurdle perfectly. You are not taking a photograph of the DNA molecule itself. You are firing a highly focused beam of X-rays at a crystallized strand of DNA.
Just a beam of radiation.
Right. And when the X-rays hit the atoms, they scatter, creating spots and arcs on a piece of photographic film. Then you have to reverse engineer the molecular structure from those spots.
And doing this in 1952 meant no computers.
None. It meant 60 grueling hours of continuous X-ray exposure for single image.
Wow. 60 hours. And if the machine is bumped even a fraction of a millimeter, or if, the temperature in the room fluctuates,
that 60-hour exposure is entirely ruined. You start over.
That is just punishing.
The precision required was staggering. But Franklin's defining breakthrough, the technical leap that really separated her from every other researcher in the world, was her realization about humidity.
Right, the A and B forms.
Yes. DNA is a highly dynamic molecule. It physically changes its shape depending on how much water it absorbs.
Which means earlier researchers were essentially looking at a blurred mess.
Exactly. They were X-raying DNA samples that were a random mixture of both the wet form and the dry form at the exact same time.
It's like taking a double exposure photograph of two completely different people and trying to measure the distance between their eyes. The data is just fundamentally corrupted.
Corrupted from the start. Franklin recognized this immediately. So to solve it, she engineered this ingenious method using a microcamera where she bubbled hydrogen gas through specific saturated salt solutions.
That is so clever.
It was. By meticulously controlling the chemistry of those salt solutions, she could dial in the exact relative humidity inside the camera chamber. She physically forced the DNA to commit to being entirely in the A form, which is dry, or the B form, which is wet.
She removed the blur. I mean, that alone is a massive achievement. Our sources highlight a critical point here, and I want to make sure you catch this. In rigorous fields, technical mastery is not a consolation prize. While the ideas people get the real glory, mastery is the contribution.
Absolutely. Photo 51 wasn't a lucky shot captured by a technician.
Yeah.
It was the product of a controlled environment refined to a degree no one else on the planet had yet managed.
Right. The evidence is the foundation of the science. Franklin's ability to separate the wet and dry forms provided the undeniable bedrock. Without that perfectly isolated B-form image, the double helix remains an unsolvable theoretical puzzle.
Which brings us to the contrast. This rigid dedication to the evidence puts her on a direct collision course with the researchers up at Cambridge, James Watson and Francis Crick.
Yeah, the clash of styles here is wild.
Franklin is doing 60-hour exposures and managing saturated salt solutions. Meanwhile, Watson and Crick are relying heavily on chemical intuition, data published by others, and a massive willingness to just guess.
They were literally building physical models out of wire and tin plates, right?
Yes. They represented a completely different philosophical approach to discovery. They were model builders who believed in rapid iteration. They would construct a physical model, see where the atoms bumped into each other in impossible ways, tear it down, and try again.
Okay, I have to pause here and play devil's advocate for a second, looking at this through a modern lens. Because in today's tech world, we idolize the move fast and break things mentality. We celebrate rapid prototyping and failing fast. Weren't Watson and Crick right to iterate quickly? I mean, they were trying to solve the biggest puzzle in biology, so why shouldn't we applaud their hustle?
Well, this highlights the fundamental difference between software engineering and physical biology. In software, moving fast and breaking things is an effective strategy because if your code has a bug, you issue a patch the next morning.
Right. The stakes for being temporarily wrong are low.
Exactly. But in fundamental science, a fast wrong answer isn't a stepping stone. It is noise that actively pollutes the scientific record.
Because it sends other researchers down blind alleys?
Precisely. And we see the danger of their approach in late 1951. Watson attends a lecture where Franklin is summarizing her early, unpublished findings on DNA.
And he doesn't even take notes, does he?
No. Brimming with confidence, he doesn't bother taking a single note. He returns to Cambridge and attempts to relay her data to Crick from memory. And he gets the water content of the molecule completely wrong.
Oh, no. So based on that faulty memory, they build an elaborate physical model and proudly invite Franklin up to Cambridge to review it.
It was a disaster. Franklin walks into the room, looks at their wire and tin model, and immediately dismantles it.
Just takes it apart conceptually.
Yeah. Beyond just the water content being mathematically impossible based on our measurements, Watson and Crick had put the phosphate backbone of the molecule on the inside of the structure.
Which is chemically absurd if you understand the properties of phosphates. The phosphate backbone is highly hydrophilic. It attracts water. So if you put the water-loving structure on the inside of a molecule surrounded by a cellular environment, The water rushes in and the entire molecule blows itself apart.
She pointed this out instantly. Their model was inherently unstable. It had to be humiliatingly withdrawn, costing Watson and Crick months of wasted effort.
Wow.
And this is why Franklin refused to build a model or publish her structural theories. She knew she didn't yet have the definitive mathematical proof to back them up. She had seen too many elegant, beautiful theories collapse the moment they met actual, hard measurements.
Her caution wasn't timidity at all, it was pure integrity. But sadly, that exact integrity, her refusal to publish incomplete findings, left her incredibly vulnerable because she was dealing with people who had no qualms about racing ahead with whatever they could get their hands on.
That's the tragic irony. Her flawless data, including Photo 51, sat in her desk drawer while she methodically built her mathematical case. 11 months after she captured the image, Maurice Wilkins took it upon himself to show Photo 51 to James Watson.
Without asking her.
Entirely without Franklin's knowledge, and certainly without her permission.
And Watson's own memoir describes his physical reaction to seeing that photograph. He wrote that his mouth fell open and his pulse began to race, because the moment he looked at Photo 51, that crisp, unmistakable X shape in the center of the diffraction pattern told him instantly that the molecule was a helix.
And because Franklin had calibrated the humidity so perfectly, the image wasn't just a conceptual hint. It provided the exact dimensions, the specific angles, and the precise spacing of the structural turns that Watson and Crick needed to finally build a stable model.
It's just staggering. Within weeks of seeing her private data, they finalized their model. They published it in the journal Nature in April 1953, and 9 years later, they win the Nobel Prize.
It's a tough pill to swallow.
It feels less like a heist and more like a hostile corporate takeover. Imagine, writing a revolutionary new algorithm, spending years debugging the absolute most complex edge cases to ensure it's flawless.
Right.
Then a rival developer glances at your raw code on an unlocked monitor, slaps a rudimentary UI on it, launches the platform, and lands the cover of Forbes as a visionary founder while you're still running diagnostics.
The scientific community certainly viewed it through that lens decades later when the full story emerged. But what is truly revealing about Franklin's character is what she did in that exact same issue of Nature in April 1953.
Right. She published her own paper alongside theirs.
She did.
And her paper was scrupulously precise. It read almost as supporting evidence for their theoretical model. She made only the claims that her data directly supported. There was zero speculation, no grandstanding, and no attempt to stretch her findings beyond the absolute mathematical certainty she had achieved.
It is the ultimate display of scientific restraint. Years later, when Watson published the double helix, he painted Franklin in a deeply unflattering light as an obstructionist, someone who aggressively hoarded data she supposedly couldn't interpret herself.
Which we know is completely unfair.
Entirely. History has shown that her restraint was actually a form of deep scientific courage. Courage doesn't always look like shouting the loudest or being the first to plant a flag based on a hunch. Sometimes it looks exactly like having the discipline to say only what you can definitively prove, regardless of the pressure around you.
That is so powerful. And, after her data is used without her knowledge and Watson and Crick start absorbing the glory, it would be so easy for her narrative to end there. Rosalind Franklin could simply be cast as the tragic victim of a toxic boys' club.
She isn't.
No. Her second act is arguably the most impressive part of her entire legacy. She didn't let the dysfunction at King's College destroy her love for discovery.
By late 1953, the environment there had become completely untenable for her. So she transferred to Birkbeck College, joining J.D. Bernal's lab, and she completely started over. She pivoted away from DNA entirely and turned her intense focus to studying viruses.
And she didn't just study them. She established the foundational principles of structural virology, working alongside a researcher named Aaron Klug, who would later win a Nobel Prize, largely building on their collaborative work. She applied those same rigorous X-ray crystallography techniques to the tobacco mosaic virus.
Exactly. She proved that the outer coats of viruses are not just random blobs of matter. She demonstrated they are built from repeating protein subunits arranged in highly precise mathematical geometric patterns.
Uncovering the math of nature again.
Right. She mapped the structures of several plant viruses with the same absolute clarity she brought to DNA.
And our sources emphasize that this Birkbeck period was the happiest of her scientific life. She traveled extensively, collaborated openly with international researchers, and built a warm, fiercely dedicated research group.
She didn't spend those years nursing a grudge.
No, not plotting revenge or relitigating her miserable experience at King's College.
She essentially proved that the most powerful response to being underestimated or marginalized is to simply go do phenomenal work somewhere else. She trusted that her output would eventually speak for itself.
It's tragic, though. She unfortunately never knew the full extent of the theft. She passed away from ovarian cancer in 1958 at the age of just 37.
37. And given the safety standards of the time, her illness was highly likely caused by her massive continuous exposure to X-ray radiation.
She gave her life to the work.
She really did. She worked almost until the very end, reviewing data from her hospital bed between treatments. She didn't live long enough to see Watson's memoir published or to see the Nobel Prize awarded to Watson, Crick, and Wilkins in 1962. And since the Nobel Committee does not award prizes posthumously, she was officially left out of that specific historical milestone.
But the broader historical record has a way of course-correcting over time, doesn't it? Institutions might fail to recognize brilliant work in the short term, but rigorously constructed science outlasts the initial scramble for credit.
It always does.
Today, her name is etched onto research vessels and university buildings around the world. And fittingly, the European Space Agency named their ExoMars rover after her.
And they painted Photo 51 right on the side of the rover. The image she meticulously captured in a damp London basement is now an emblem for the search for life on other planets.
Wow. To summarize what we've unpacked today, Rosalind Franklin's story is a profound reminder that technical mastery matters. Moving fast and breaking things is often just an excuse for sloppy execution. Doing the meticulous, behind-the-scenes preparation and letting the evidence dictate your claims will always be the standard for true innovation.
I'd like to leave you with one final thought drawn from her very earliest work. Before she ever looked at DNA or viruses, Franklin spent years studying the microstructure of coal during a world war.
Right.
Coal is dark, messy, highly variable, and practically synonymous with dirt. But she learned how to find absolute mathematical order within it. Her unique ability to find clarity in the dark, messy reality of coal is exactly what primed her to isolate the crisp, clear structure of life itself when she was thrust into that hostile basement at King's College.
That is an amazing connection.
So think about that. What messy, seemingly unglamorous coal in your own current work might actually be training you for your greatest breakthrough.
A brilliant question for you to carry with you. Until next time, stay curious, take the 60-hour exposure, and make sure you get the image right.